Chapter 5, Keep It Simple. In his attempts to unlock the complex secrets of the universe, Albert Einstein, the greatest scientist of the 20th century, had one overriding maxim: everything should be made as simple as possible, but no simpler. We agree. We know that the financial press is full of stories about the complexity of modern finance and that the investment world often appears frighteningly complex. But despite all of the convoluted gimmicks some charlatans would like to sell you because they are so profitable for the sellers, you can prosper by embracing simplicity. That's why this chapter presents some very simple, easy to understand, and easy to follow rules to help you achieve financial security. While some individuals have uniquely complex financial circumstances, we believe the rules we offer will work well for almost all investors, and portfolios we will present gets it right for at least 90% of the individual investors. We leave out on purpose all sorts of complicated details that really are just minor adjustments for the unusual circumstances that might affect particular individuals. In this section, we first review the simple rules for successful long-term investing. We then present for you and the loved ones, we hope you will discuss it with the Keep It Simple Sweetheart portfolio. We think our rules and portfolio recommendations contain the very best advice that all investors require. The KISS portfolio gets it right for at least 90% of individual investors. Review of basic rules. There are some basic rules in abbreviated form. We have discussed most of them in earlier chapters. Number 1, save early and regularly. The most important step you can take to building a comfortable nest egg and providing a worry-free retirement is to start saving early and to keep saving regularly. There's no simple road to riches for you and your family. The secret to getting wealthy is that there is no secret. The only way to get rich, unless you inherit or marry a fortune or hit the lottery, is to get rich slowly. So start early and contribute as much as possible to your savings for as long as possible. Number 2, use the help of your employer and Uncle Sam to supercharge your savings. We are amazed and distressed at how many people do not take full advantage of their employer's 401k or 403b retirement security plan. Sadly, many people do not even join the plan, even when their employer would match every dollar the employee saves. And Uncle Sam contributes a lot too, because your contributions are not taxed until many years later when you withdraw money needed to enjoy your retirement. Number 3, set aside a cash reserve. As the bumper sticker tells us, stuff happens. We need cash reserves for those cost surprises that we will learn to expect as part of life. Some riches reserve, some reserve. Such reserves should be invested in high quality short-term instruments because safety of principal and assured liquidity are your paramount concerns. The size of the cash reserve is up to you. Financial planners suggest you set aside at least 6 months of living expenses. COVID-19 demonstrated that even a larger reserve may be needed. Don't take on risk by chasing high yield assets, but do minimize costs as an appropriate with all financial instruments. The one investment lesson we are absolutely sure of is that the higher the expenses you pay the provider of any investment service, the lower will be the return to you. The cash reserve could be invested in government guaranteed bank deposits or in safe money market funds. Shop for the highest rate available. Internet banks often offer the best rates. You may use savings accounts or bank certificates of deposit, CDs, that make sure that any savings deposit or CD is put in the bank that is insured by the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, the FDIC. While the money market funds listed later are not insured, they often have higher rates and they give you the advantage of free checking for bills of $250 or more. These money market funds typically buy very large CDs from banks, or they purchase the short-term obligations of prime corporate borrowers. If you want to be super safe, you can buy the money funds listed on page 75 that invest only in obligations guaranteed by the US government. These are called government or treasury money market funds. The lists in the table on the following page also include tax-exempt money market funds. These funds invest in obligations of state and local government, and the interest paid by these funds is exempt from federal taxation. You might also check whether state tax-exempt money market funds exist for your state of residence. These funds can avoid state income taxes as well as federal taxes. Number 4, make sure you are covered by insurance. If you are the breadwinner in your family and your spouse and children are dependent on you for support, you need life insurance and long-term disability insurance, and you need medical insurance. But when you buy insurance, remember the KISS principle. Buy simple, low-cost life insurance, not complex whole life insurance, which combines a high-cost investment program with the life insurance you need. The main cost driver for disability insurance is the coverage for lost income when you can't work for a few months. You may decide to self-insure against this moderate risk to reduce your costs substantially. The coverage you really want is against the calamity of being unable to work for years and years. Consider buying coverage only against a major loss. As with all financial products you buy, shop around. The overarching principle is that the more you pay the provider of the financial service, the less there will be for you. Number 5, diversification reduces anxiety. Diversification reduces the risk of any investment program. You should hold not just a few common stocks, but rather a broadly diversified portfolio. You should hold not just US stocks, but also the stocks of foreign countries, including stocks in the fast-growing emerging markets such as China and India. You should hold bonds as well as stocks. While stock markets all over the world tend to go down together during times of financial crisis, broad diversification usually reduces both short-term and long-term risk. Number 6, avoid all credit card debt, period. There are a few absolute rules in investing except the avoidance of credit card debt. There is no way you can get ahead of the game if you are paying 18, 20, or 22% on your credit card balance. If you do have a credit card balance, the most profitable investment you can make is to pay off your credit card debt. So concentrate your efforts on paying it off. Number 7, ignore the short-term sound and fury of Mr. Market. The biggest mistakes investors make are letting emotions dominate and being influenced by the crowd. Investors cause themselves substantial heartache and inferior returns by making buy and sell decisions based on the provocations of Mr. Market and all too human tendencies to follow the herd, especially during the inevitable periods of excessive optimism and pessimism. When everyone around you is losing his or her head, just stand there and do nothing. Keep your eyes and mind focused on the long term. Number 8, use low-cost index funds. Nobody knows more than the total of all knowledge of all those active and often expert investors who together determine the market prices of stocks. It is true that the market sometimes makes mistakes, often egregious ones, such as the overvaluation of high-tech and internet stocks at the turn of the century. But many of the pundits who predicted the internet crash had been calling the market substantially overvalued in 1992. Market timers are wrong at least as often as they are right. And when they are wrong, the cost of being wrong is quite substantial. Yes, the market can and does make mistakes, but don't even try to outsmart it. Over the last 50 years, our securities markets have been transformed from markets dominated almost entirely by individual investors to markets dominated by full-time professional institutional investors. Today, only the most remarkably gifted and diligent individual investors should even begin to consider buying individual stocks in an attempt to beat the market. We have well over 100 years of collective experience keeping up with the professional literature, have taught investing in leading graduate schools, and serve on investment committees all over the world. And we are both glad we index. Most professional investors index a substantial share of their equity and bond portfolios because indexing provides broad diversification at low cost with tax efficiency. Use index funds for all your long-term investments. With index funds, you don't get average performance. You get above average performance because index funds have lower expense charges and avoid most unnecessary costs and unnecessary taxes. Later in the chapter, we will recommend the specific funds you should consider. Number 9, focus on major investment categories. Avoid exotics like venture capital, private equity, and hedge funds. We believe you should focus on 3 simple investment categories. Number 1, common stocks, which represent ownership interest in manufacturing and service-oriented companies. Number 2, bonds, which are IOUs of governments, government agencies, and corporations. And number 3, real estate, which can be best acquired through your ownership of your own single family house. We know that salespeople will regale you with fascinating stories about how certain exotic investments, such as hedge funds, commodities, private equity, or venture capital, can make you rich, even quickly. Do not listen. Sure, fascinating stories appear in the media from time to time about spectacular profits being made, but here are 4 good reasons for urging abstinence. Number 1, only the very best performers in each exotic category achieve great results. Number 2, the record of the average performers are discouraging, and those in the 3rd and 4th quartiles can be deeply disappointing. Number 3, the best performers are already fully booked and are not accepting new investors. Number 4, if you have not already established a clearly preferential position as an investor, your chances of investing with the best are realistically 0. If you don't own a large private jet, hobnob with movie stars, and know your way around unusually well, then you can and should ignore the exotics. They're not for you or for either of us. Beware, if you look hard enough to find a manager who will assure you that he will do great things for you in one of the exotics, you will find him. But don't even begin to think that the promise will actually be fulfilled. Asset allocation. The appropriate allocation for individual investors depends upon a few key factors. The primary factor is age. If you have lots of time to ride out the ups and downs of the market, you can afford a large allocation to common stocks. If you are retired, it's wise to invest conservatively. Another factor is your financial situation. A widow in ill health who is unable to work and who counts on her investments to cover her living expenses will not want to risk losing substantial amounts of capital during the stock market downturn. She has either the time horizon nor the earnings from employment to ride out a major stock setback. The third big factor is your temperament. Some people simply can't stand to experience wide swings in their net worth and will want to overweight bonds and cash reserves in their portfolios. Other people care about long-term growth. To each his own. With caution. Know thyself and match your investing to who you are and where you are in life. Know thyself and match your investing to who you are and where you are in life. Thousands of people go skiing on a typical winter's day, and almost all of them have a wonderful time skiing at their own levels on the trails and slopes that are right for them. The secret to success and enjoyment in so many parts of life is to know your capabilities and stay within them. Similarly, the key to success in investing is to know yourself and invest within your investing capabilities and within your emotional capabilities. No asset allocation will fit all 30-year-old, 50-year-old, or 80-year-olds. Even an 80-year-old might want an asset allocation more suitable to a 30-year-old if she plans to leave most of her estate to her children or grandchildren, because the relevant time horizon for wise investing is their time horizon, not hers. The appropriate allocation for those planning bequests should be geared to the age of the recipient, not the age of the donor, for that part of their total investments. The key to success in investing is to invest with the asset mix that's best for you, considering your financial situation, assets, income, and savings now and in your future. Your age, your emotional strengths, particularly at market highs and market lows, and your attitude toward market risk, your knowledge of and interest in investing. Asset allocation ranges. Now let's get down to the specifics. Assuming you have already set up your cash reserve, we present our asset allocation guidelines next as reasonable age-related ranges. They will make sense for 90% of the investors. Individual circumstances and investment skills and emotional strengths could make allocations outside these ranges appropriate for you, but even so, this is where to start. We also recommend that you own your house if you can afford to do so. The main reason is to enhance the quality of your living. By putting some of your money into a single family home, you will also give you a real estate investment in addition to the stocks and bonds in your savings retirement plan. Our asset allocation guidelines show how you might wisely change your asset mix according to your age and your age-related tolerance for market risks. Here are two tables that show how you might wisely change your asset mix according to your age and your age-related tolerance for market risks. The first table shows what Bert advises. We both agree that this pattern is sensible and conservative for most investors. Charlie worried that it may be too conservative and offers an alternative on page 82. With more exposure to stocks and thus to market volatility, particularly now when interest rates are depressed. These percentages are more equity related than those shown in earlier editions. The reason is that at the time this edition went to press, the yields on the best quality US government bonds were very close to zero. Even if the inflation rate remains below 2%, investors will be receiving an inadequate rate of return and subjecting themselves to possible capital losses should interest rates rise in the future and bond prices fall. Having some relatively safe assets in a portfolio does make sense, but investors may want to substitute the surrogate bond portfolio described in page 111 for the bond percentages recommended here. Charlie's recommended portfolio mix aims for a higher rate of return over the long term, but depends crucially on the investor's short-term staying power because bad markets are sure to come again and again. Charlie points out that most young people don't count their most important equity, their personal knowledge, capital, and the large present value of their future earnings from work. Bert notes that we can also lose our jobs. The unprecedented rapidity of job losses during the spring of 2020 as the COVID-19 pandemic accelerated bears witness to the enormous uncertainty that affects our lives. Charlie noted that job loss is not usually permanent. Charlie also believes that homeownership, while a source of gains after inflation, is part of a typical investor's total portfolio and, when recognized correctly, damps down both gains and losses experienced in the securities markets. And so, if included in the investor's total portfolio, should make both up and down markets less emotionally provocative. Both agree strongly that all investors are better safe than sorry, and no investor should take on risks outside his or her comfort zone. Charlie's allocation to stocks assume indexing, as do Bert's. We need to emphasize again that the allocation you choose depends critically on your emotional ability to accept big swings in the market value of your portfolio. Not even your psychiatrist can tell you the proper allocation. If you go toward the 100% allocation to common stock investment, as Charlie would recommend for young savers, you must be prepared to accept that at times your 401k will look like a 301k or a 201k when stocks fall sharply. If you can accept that kind of volatility, that's fine. But Bert, who spends a lot of time counseling young faculty members at Princeton, knows how tough it is to see the value of your savings shrink, and that is why he tends to recommend a lower allocation to equities. For those who are most comfortable With year-to-year market fluctuations, Charlie would even favor 100% in stocks for younger investors, which is what he did, which is what he is glad he did and kept doing even into his early 80s, taking on a market risk by increasing the proportion of stocks in your portfolio will probably result in your earning a great long run rate of return. It could also result in lots more sleepless nights. If you are not sure you can live with and live all the way through the worst market's turbulence, don't take on extra market risk. In the eat well versus sleep well trade-off, reduce your stock percentage to the level where you know, given who you really are, that you will sleep well. Put your long-term investments into low-cost index funds. The best choice for your equity investments is a fund indexed to total world stock market. If you are truly uncomfortable investing in foreign stocks, you could choose a domestic total stock market fund. Even then, you will have lots of foreign earnings because, for instance, Coca-Cola earns over half of its earnings abroad. We recommend that you be diversified internationally because the United States represents much less than half of the world's economic activity and stock market capitalization. For your bonds, choose a total U.S. bond market index fund. As you get older, change the mix toward bond investments, as the tables indicate. You can usually accomplish this rather easily by changing the allocation of the annual contribution to your 401k. If adjusting new allocations is insufficient, you could gradually shift some of your existing assets from stocks and bonds. Once a year, rebalance your portfolio to the stock bond balance that is right for you. Suppose your preferred allocation is 60% stocks and 40% bonds, but an exuberant stock market has pushed the equity allocation to 70%. Take some of the equity gains off the table and restore your 60-40 balance. Or if punishing bear markets reduced the equity proportion to 50%, sell some bonds and buy more stocks. If you have other investments, be sure to do your rebalancing in the tax-sheltered part of your portfolio, your 401k or your IRA, so you will avoid paying income from other sources such as Social Security and distribution from retirement funds. Investing in retirement. We recommend a significant allocation to bonds for investors in retirement because bonds provide a relatively steady source of income for living expenses. Some common stocks, however, are included to provide inflation protection. And some tips, Treasury inflated protection bonds, are included in a total bond market index fund. The interest paid on tips is augmented during periods when the rate of inflation rises, so retirees can expect increases in income during inflation periods. Remember the important exception. If you are fortunate enough to have enough capital to be able to meet your living expenses without tapping into your assets, you can choose a different asset allocation more heavily weighted into stocks. Money that you can expect to leave to children and grandchildren should be invested according to their age, not yours. Most people, however, will be drawing down their savings during retirement. They will be faced with the decision of whether to buy an annuity with part or all of their retirement savings. A fixed annuity is a contract with an insurance company. For an initial payment by you, the insurance company will guarantee to pay you a fixed annual amount for as long as you live. Annuities have one important advantage. They ensure that you will not outlive your money. Most financial planners advise retirees to purchase annuities. There are individual circumstances that argue against annuities, however. Once you die, the payments from the insurance company stop. Thus, if you are in a poor health, you may not be well served by an annuity contract. If you have sufficient resources to leave to substantial estate to children and grandchildren, you will not want to purchase an annuity. And fixed annuities have one major advantage. Payouts do not increase, have one major disadvantage. Payouts do not increase to offset inflation. Here is our KISS advice. If you are reasonably healthy as you enter the retirement years, and especially if you have good genes for a long life and few bad risk factors, Invest half of your fixed income investments in an annuity. Then, even if you live to 100, you will never outlive your assets. But be an educated consumer. Buy only a plain vanilla fixed annuity. The fancy annuities, which adjust for inflation and have all kinds of bells and whistles, may appear attractive, but they carry large expense charges and are difficult to analyze. Shop around. In general, you will get a better deal by buying direct from the company rather than providing commission for a hungry sales rep. Get specific. Here we will list the funds we believe you should use for your common stock and bond investments. All the recommended funds are broad index funds and all are very low cost. Not all index funds are the same. There are hundreds to choose from. Some equity index funds concentrate on big companies, so-called large capitalization stocks. The Standard & Poor 500 index fund is such a fund. Other index funds concentrate on smaller companies or on high growth stocks or on particular sector of the economy or on foreign companies. There is also a variety of bond index funds, from very safe short-term government bonds to risky indexes of high-yield bonds. We recommend that you concentrate on two broad-based index funds, one a total worldwide stock market fund and the other a total bond market fund. We offer a choice of broad-based index funds. We do so not because we think you should own more than one fund of each particular type. Both authors have had a long association with Vanguard Group of investment companies, and we wish to avoid even the possible appearance of conflict of interest. All the funds listed meet our criteria and have low expense ratios. Our preference for an equity index fund is that you diversify globally. The United States represents only about 40% of the world stock market. We buy cars from Japan and Germany. We buy wine from France, Austria, and Chile. We buy clothing from China, Vietnam, and Indonesia. We believe your stock portfolio should be global as well. If you don't invest in a total world index fund, we recommend that only half of your stock portfolio be invested in a U.S. stock market index fund, with their other half in a total international stock market index fund. We also list our recommendations for suitable total U.S. stock market index funds. We recommend total stock market funds rather than the popular index funds based on narrower indexes such as the Standard & Poor's 500 large company stock index, because the S&P 500 only represents about 70% of the total value of all the stocks traded in the US. It excludes 30% made up of smaller companies, many of which are most entrepreneurial and capable of the fastest future growth. Any of the funds listed on the table on page 89 would be suitable, but be sure to notice the difference in expense ratios. Beginning stock market investors should start with a U.S. total stock market fund before adding an international fund. A total U.S. stock market index fund will actually provide some global diversification because many of the multinational domestic companies, from Procter & Gamble to Coca-Cola, do a great job of their business abroad. We do believe, however, that investors should combine one of the total U.S. stock market index funds with a total international stock market index fund. The table on page 90 lists our recommendations for suitable total international equity funds. There's one-stop shopping method to obtain both domestic and international equity investments in one fund. The fund is called the Total World Stock Index Fund. The expense ratio cited on the following table is slightly higher than those of individual funds listed previously, but it is a convenient way to obtain the broadest diversification in a single fund. A total world stock market ETF, such as ticker BT, would be suitable as well. Investing in a total world stock index fund is a convenient way to obtain the broadest diversification in a single fund, like one-stop shopping. Page 93. Well-diversified portfolios should have holdings of bonds as well as stocks. Again, we believe that index funds provide the most efficient vehicle for individual investors to hold bonds. On the opposite page, we will list 3 bond index funds that are suitable investments. We believe that the bonds listed here provide suitable exposure to the stock and bond markets. They can easily be purchased by calling a toll-free number listed by our or by visiting the websites. Some investors will find that exchange traded funds or ETFs will be useful investment instruments. ETFs most are based on index funds, trade like individual stocks. The 2 most popular ETFs are the QQQQs or cubes that track the NASDAQ 100 index, and spiders, ticker SPY, which explains the particular spelling, that track the Standard & Poor's 500 stock index. Neither of these ETFs is as broad as we like, but fortunately, new ones are now available that track total stock market indexes in the United States and in the world. A table on the opposite page shows the menu of ETFs that we recommend. ETFs tend to have very low expense ratios, and they can be more tax efficient than mutual funds because they are able to sell holdings without generating a taxable event. This could be an advantage for taxable investors. However, brokerage commissions are charged on the purchase of ETFs, and for small and moderate purchases, these commissions can overwhelm those other advantages. No load indexed mutual funds typically have no purchase fees. However, if you are investing a lump sum, as for example, when rolling over an established plan, such as an IRA, an ETF may be an optimal choice. The Vanguard Total World ETF, ticker VT, will give you all diversification you need over both domestic and international markets with one-stop shopping.